So let's explain those IK and FK guys a little bit more. Let's say that you want to animate this. Imagine this is a leg and you want to animate this foot kicking some sort of a ball or something like that. So let's do a simple animation, something like along these lines. And I really don't like when this happens. I want to keep this goal attached to this chain. So let me reset the position, and here under IK tag, under advanced, I will say keep goal. This way I will not be able to move that guy away from the chain. Okay? So let's try something like that. So let's put a keyframe here on frame 0, and let's try and add a keyframe here, and watch what happens if I press play. It folds where the joint is. This is not good. So we want to avoid this bend here. We just want a straight arcing motion. And we'll probably have to add an intermediate keyframe here, something like that. Let's give it a shot. And it still does its own thing. And that's the problem. You would eventually nail it. And it would be alright, but you already have 3 keys. Maybe you will have even more. And that's a bit tedious. And you actually want to animate in FK. Let me undo all this and get back to our initial position like this, and we can start all over. So if you try to animate in FK right now, you will see that you have a problem here. Let me undo that, and we will reset the position for this guy so we have a straight chain. Before actually Cinema 4D lets you animate in FK, you should select the IK tag. Firstly, do a reset FK just to make sure, and scrap this to 100%. And now you will be able to animate in forward kinematics. So that means all the joints will follow this topmost joint, as opposed in inverse kinematics they will orient and behave according to this joint goal. So now, as you can see, you just rotate this and create a simple keyframe. Scrub the time to frame 30 and rotate this somewhere arbitrarily, do a keyframe, and now you can see we actually have a nice arcing motion. This is much more cleaner than the IK version, and animators generally prefer to have both IK and FK possibilities on their rigs, so we got to give them such ability, and this is really easy in Cinema 4D. You will decide whether you want to use IK or the FK, or nice gradual blending between them. If you're not sure, you just go back to IK mode. If you're not sure, and if I reset this, if you don't know what is your IK pose, you will select the IK tag here, and if you are not sure what your FK pose is, just enable this show FK. Let's say you are positioning your character in IK mode and now you want to switch to FK because you have some simple arcing motion that is much more easily done with FK. So you would do what I said and simply switch this to FK, and you will see a problem happening. What if you want to keep the position, the actual position of all the chain you made in IK? So you want to start from this position but do an FK animation. Simply while you are in IK mode, do a reset FK here, and that FK will snap exactly to the joint position. Now you can happily slide all over to FK and animate as you want. So now, instead of deleting all these keyframes and doing the undos, I will just revert to the saved scene. Answer yes, and this is what we actually started with. So let's see what other nifty things we can find under this IK tag. One thing that is really interesting is this squash and stretch feature. For example, if I enable this and put the value all the way to 100% and just move this guy a bit, see it stretches the joint chain. And it also does that for the squash. See how I have to reselect that IK text once I enable the move tool and select the joint. I'll just lock this manager just briefly so we can explore these settings a bit while we are working with the move tool. Now we are stretching the chain and you can see the bending occurs, and if we enable this squash all the way to 100%, no bending will occur. It will just squash the chain. You can play with some intermediate values, see how does it work. And you can also animate all these values. You see, everything that has this little circle in front of it, it means it is animatable. So you can pretty much imagine what kind of versatility you are presented with. Here under type, that is actually type of deformation that will occur once you attach this skeleton to a polygon mesh. And we will talk about that a bit later in the later lessons. So let's disable those two guys and do a reset. And don't forget to unlock this, because it can really drive you insane. For example, if you select something else, you won't get attributes for that object you selected because the manager is locked. Of course, it's enough for D. You have a freedom, for example, to press this little guy, which will open additional manager, and you can really have a zillion of these managers if you want. And you can see this plus icon on almost every manager. And you should probably talk a bit about dynamics now, and I'll completely hide this joint chain and create a new one just to show you that dynamic effect. So let me select my joint tool and create some random joint chain with a couple of joints. Before proceeding, I just want to say, since this is recorded in release 12, these dynamics are also available in release 11 and 11.5, but they're available as a separate tag. If I remember correctly, that is called soft IK. So if you are on release 11 or 11.5, I think you will be still able to follow. Here, when we created the joint chain, we actually had the option that created this root null. We don't need it. Always get rid of everything you don't need. Just avoid cluttering your scene as much as you can. And this time we will create our IK chain manually. So we'll go here under tags, character tags, IK, and let's unlock this guy, since it's still on this tag we created a long time ago for this hidden joint hierarchy. So unlock it, and here we will specify the end of the chain, and the end of the chain is obviously this last joint, so just draw it in here in the end slot and you will see something happening. So now we have our chain, our IK chain. So now if we would simply select this joint and convert it to a null and call it joint goal and drop it here, we would actually do all the steps manually that this character commands create IK chain does. So it's simply an somewhat automated way to do all that. The reason I did this manually, since we actually don't need a goal object, since this will be a dynamic chain. So let's go under Dynamics tab and enable them. And if you press play now, you'll notice something happened. Let me go back and press play again. You see that each joint acted somewhat according to laws of physics. You can actually select it and move it while the animation plays to see the dynamic effect. So let's try. See it wobbles just a bit. And if you want to see the dynamic effect without playing the animation for any reason, possibly you will have many objects in your scene. So simply go back, and here under character menu, there is under manager, there is an auto redraw function. Enable it and check this redraw every 50 milliseconds. You can change this number. If you put a really low number like 10 milliseconds, it will refresh really often. So you'll be able to see that effect even more. So let's select that IK tag and we'll again lock that manager so I can move freely and have those attributes presented. And here under strength, this is a little bit tricky because many of you would assume that 100% means really dynamic, and that is not the case. This strength value should probably be considered as a stiffness value, so 100% is really stiff. You can go even above 100%, or lower values would mean really loose. Let's try something like 10 and see what it does for us. And you can see it's a little bit more loose. This drag guy is a damper for all these other settings. So if you have problems when your dynamics are jittering or behaving oddly or popping up, or they don't seem to stop after the simulation, simply increase this drag, but value of 1 or 2%, possibly 3 is more than enough in most cases. This next guy is named position hold, and it means just that, and lower this value for just a tiny amount. So let's say something around 80 perhaps. And if I wobble now, if I move this, you will actually see it wobbles much more. This root hold guy simply hold the position of how joints were initially made, and if you go close to 0%, it will loosen it up completely. So for example at 100%, it's really somewhat stiff and behaves like a spring. You can obviously see that effect. Here you can enable collisions and put collider objects, but beware, colliders must be polygon objects. And under here you can find many various advanced settings. I often find this redraw function to be very useful. For example, if I put here 1, it will redraw to sort of the maximum value. So you will see that effect really pronounced. And when you will be doing simulations with colliding objects, and if you have problems with your collisions, if it doesn't look right, if your objects are traveling really fast, and everything happens in a really tight amount of frames, increase this number of steps until you get correct simulation. I think this is more than enough for starters for IK system, and hopefully this was not too difficult to follow, and maybe it's a bit heavy without any real examples, but we will use all this that we learned from previous lessons and from lessons that will follow, and we will use that exactly the same knowledge and principles to rig an arm, a hand, fingers, a leg. So this is really important. Now we will talk about binding the chains to polygon meshes. We will talk about deformations and about weight painting.